Hello, everyone. My name is Kraszewski. I am an instructor at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. My paper is entitled Walter Gropius, the Bauhaus School, Postmodernity Born During the Dying Embers of the Great War, or as it's more commonly known, the First World War, World War One. I've tried to reduce my paper into kind of a bite-sized, digestible slideshow, and I'll move pretty quickly to accommodate the 15 to 20 minute time limit. So I'll be moving through the slides pretty quickly, but as you see, I'll go from biographical information to a compare and contrast with the world of design as it was before Gropius to Gropius's legacy with Bauhaus, his impact in America. And then what I'm kind of primarily arguing, what I'm most interested in is, as the subtitle says, the idea of postmodernity writ large, things we associate even outside of architecture and design, uh, postmodern writers, postmodern artists, even people on that line between modernity and postmodernity, Picasso, Hemingway, whatever it may be. I'm arguing that Walter Gropius helps so much in the design world inaugurate that postmodern revolution writ large. Okay, so Walter Gropius, biographical information, 1883 to 1869, born in Berlin in 1883. Even before the First World War, he already is in a design firm, Peter Behrens, that focuses on a more utilitarian, form-following function, not so much about ornamentality and that kind of thing. Uh, Prior to the First World War, the First World War breaks out in 1914. He already is involved in this kind of mindset, this kind of break from the past prior to that event. But as I'll argue over the course of this paper, this presentation, it really is the First World War in which Gropius serves that gives him that push and is that great impetus for his move into full postmodernity and a complete breaking from previous design traditions. Fights in the First World War, is wounded, awarded the Iron Cross, flees Germany when the Nazi Party comes to power, arrives in the 1930s. He'll have a long-standing connection with the Harvard Graduate School of Design. He really is kind of at the right place at the right time, both in the foundational GSD applicability in America, but even when you look at his birth, going back to that, the accident of his birth in the fin de siècle 1883, this is a time of great progress, engineering ingenuity. And so Gropius really, from his very early years, is a beneficiary of being in a place where his talents and his natural abilities towards architecture being fully formed, one could say. So something like a Gropian proximology, connective thread of the design world up into the 2020s right now, 2023 on this paper here, but really is we're in 2025 now, the modern day, his legacy unto where we are today. Okay, so the world as it was, the design world as it was before, it really is hard to overstate, I think, the full revolution that Gropius inaugurates. The short note helps, the bottom of the slide, I think, are to be focused on. That before you have, in a general sense, not exclusively, but a general focus on verticality. Of course, with Gropius, the Bauhaus School, the horizontal plane, the flat roof is canonical. A lot of iconography prior to the Bauhaus School, a monochromatic gray, white, black kind of worker focus within the Bauhaus School. And the diverse shapes and styles give way to box, glass and steel box that you really see take over the world. And we'll see in the Gropius progeny part of this paper, the influences Gropius has on people. But what do we have before? And what are we talking about, with European design in the lead up to this man arriving on the scene? The L'École de Beaux-Arts in Paris, the Ringstrasse in Vienna, of course, Sagrada Familia, Antonio Gaudi in Barcelona. A lot of iconography, verticality, these very opulent churches, a lot of use of color, elevation. The Grand World Fairs, this time this is St. Louis, 1904 in America. Of course, the Grand American World Fairs at Chicago in 1893. The original Penn Station in New York. And while he already is involved in sort of the more modern movements as a protege of Peter Behrens, it is this event that I am arguing, as is the title of my entire paper, that is the push, that is the main thing that moves Gropius from, I'm already working towards new forms, towards a more simplistic, minimalistic type architecture, to a complete break from the past. The Great War, 1914 through 1918, 41 million casualties. 20 million men wounded or killed on the battlefield. 21 more in the wake of 21 more with like kind of external injuries, kind of antecedent problems, especially psychological when you think about the idea of shell shock and um, PTSD, as we call it today, coming from the First World War. And we should not forget, right, that on the battlefield, 41 million casualties kind of combined, and after the war, the Spanish flu, the second wave of which hits in November of 1918, is right around the time when Armistice Day happens, November 11th, the end of the war. So just when these people think they're getting out of this war to end all wars, these awful years of trench warfare and things, poison gas, you have a global pandemic that, of course, all of us lived through very, very recently and are very kind of familiar with. So, of course, I could talk about this for 9 hours. I don't have that time, obviously, but to make a long story short, who wouldn't, having gone through 40 million people killed or wounded in a battle, and then upwards of 50 million affected in some way, killed or maimed by a pandemic? And if you adjust that by population, something like 500 million people today being somehow affected in a 6-year period, how would that not be this great breaking event in someone's life? And Gropius went through this directly as a soldier. Now, I really want to focus on right here this question problem that emerges out of this. June 1918, America's already in the war. It's coming to the turning point of the war. August 8th is considered the low point of the Kaiserreich, their army. At that point, things are coming close to that mentioned November 11th armistice. Gropius finds himself buried up to his neck post-shell explosion under the ruins of a classic one-story masonry and beams French country home. So he literally, talk about poetry here, is already inclined to moving away from the old way of doing things. He's buried under a classic architectural style country house. And it literally represents, as he thinks, I might die. I might never be, exhumed from here alive, being buried under this collapsing home. Does this collapsing home not represent the collapse of the entire old world? All the casualties of the war, the soon to come Spanish flu. But so I want to know, how do we get from here, the Great War era in which he serves, to basically, let's build houses like shoe factories. Let's have the house be a machine for the new worker being more than the human being to inhabit. House of the future against all sentimental hanging on to the past. And it becomes almost like the Ford Auto, right? Everyone can get one. Perhaps it's not as craftsman and as ingenious as more intentional architecture, but it serves the populace more. That's what Bauhaus is going to be, right? And so if you really want kind of a deeper focus, and again, for the sake of time, I keep checking my clock here. I do want to respect the 20-minute time limit. If you want a full Bauhaus philosophy and brief summation, once more, I could talk about this for hours, but I'd say these 6 points are kind of like, this is pretty good, right? And again, Bauhaus has dominated world architecture for the past 100 years, even into different iterations like Le Corbusier and New Internationalism and that kind of thing. Bauhaus by a different name. Everyone knows what it looks like, but right, it's this birth of modernism, rejection of ornamentation, form following function, rejecting the past. Number 5, a real kind of like we talk about today in AI and computers and that kind of thing, and architecture students moving away from hand graphics towards more computerized, digitized models in design, whatever it may be. He's also very interested in art and technology and new unity, right? This kind of like manifesto of science and progressivism. The look itself is most important. Point number 6, right? Black, gray, or white, sheer facades. Flat roof is canonical. The large windows often blurring distinctions between interior and exterior space. No ornamentation, nothing that's not necessary for the new worker being. Remember, I was buried under this house. That old world is destroyed. We just got out of this awful great war. Out of the dying embers of that, as I said in the title of this paper, a new world has emerged. So here we go. It settles ultimately, many say, on the box or glass cube. That person as the cog in the machine. So just what the doctor ordered for the modern anti-past, anti-capitalist, all business, minimalist worker bee. And I don't have to say, it goes without saying, there are tons of fans and supporters of this and tons of people who hate Bauhaus. It's very efficient, minimalistic. That's nice. That's sleek. No, it's dehumanizing. It saps all ingenuity and makes you a cog in the machine. One of the early examples of this style, Fagerswerk shoe factory. Once more, right? This narrative is not perfect. And like, well, everything before the First World War is traditional neo-Gothic, Romanesque revival, that kind of thing, Greco-Roman style. Not at all, right? You see Peter Behrens, whom he worked for before the war, this groundbreaking, the beginnings of this factory are prior to the First World War. What I'm arguing, number one, above all, is not just the First World War somehow was the only thing that moved people in the direction of more modern design. It was the large push. And then people like Gropius himself and his children really ran with it, right? But you see here, right? Dark brick base, glass facades, first attempt at a complete cube, pure functionality and design. Flat roof, blurring interior exterior distinctions. This is very much the worker being style, right? We see this really here in the kind of like halcyon days of the Bauhaus school, 1925 to 32, before Gropius leaves Germany when the Nazi party comes to power and comes to America. Bauhaus deaths out, and the Weissenhofstadtlung, two of those 33 structures in the ladder, built by the Swiss architect Le Corbusier. A direct intellectual design value with Fagaswerk, futuristic, full commitment to the new style, little color, boxy, very much progressive and new, and moving away from old ornamentation ideas about what beautiful architecture is or should be. This is the most Bauhaus building I think you can find, right? Very monochromatic, very boxy, flat roof, simple, straightforward, minimalistic. We're not doing the kind of ornamented, large verticality, things that we see like in the Sagrada Familia or Notre Dame in Paris. Gropius comes to America, teaches at Harvard, becomes a U.S. citizen. Massachusetts Institute of Technology is nearby. By the late 60s, he's going to be elected to the prestigious National Academy of Design in New York City. This is my earlier point about Gropius is everywhere, has the right connections, the right time. Why is this man so influential? Well, maybe because he's the greatest architect of the past 100 years. His supporters would say, but his detractors, even if they would say, I don't like Bauhaus, I don't like what he made of modern architecture, and now the postmodern world, they have to admit he really is at all the right places. He's at the kind of the important places where his influence can be brought to bear. What's interesting is this is his house in Massachusetts, right? And on the outside, you think, okay, that looks pretty faithful to Bauhaus orthodoxy. But in the interior space, there are some creature comforts, right? There's some kind of warmth and things that I thought, that violates Bauhaus orthodoxy. And before I quickly talk about his progeny, Gropius gave an interview in 1956 to an architecture magazine where he's like, so what? So what? They're basically asking him, like, we thought it was gray, white, or black, box, cube, no creature comforts, no more sentimentality of the past. You have this like New England cottage thing going on the interior. And he's like, well, I'm in Massachusetts now, so I wanted to incorporate some of that kind of like pumpkins in the fall, American warmth. And that begs the question, right? If I create a school and I'm making this orthodoxy in the architectural world, do I have to live by that myself personally or not? Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Philip Johnson, Frank Gehry, all in some ways, I argue, connected to Gropius, right? Le Corbusier works 4 months in Peter Becheren's office. Van der Rohe, last director of Bauhaus. But even people like Frank Gehry at the end, this Canadian architect, right, who needs no introduction, obviously, and as Vanity Fair called him in 2010, the most important architect of our age, I think are all inspired directly or indirectly by the Bauhaus orthodoxy, the simplicity, the minimalism, the rejection of the past. And I would argue really that Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Philip Johnson, like Gropius, are really moderns, but they create the postmodern world by giving space for the innovations of a very postmodern architect, I would argue, in Frank Gehry. Frank Gehry's postmodern, I'm going to show you two examples from Frank Gehry. Again, he is so famous. Everyone has seen all of his work. He's very much kind of like a Frank Lloyd Wright figure. It doesn't need to be said. So I probably won't add anything new into kind of showing things from his portfolio, so to speak. But I would argue that as this paper is entitled, the birth of postmodernity, Gropius out of the First World War. Yes, I stand by that. Without the First World War, that great breaking event, the psychological collapse of society, Gropius doing his thing with Bauhaus, influencing these architects down very much to people like Frank Gehry and postmodern architects, you would not have the same design scene that we have today within the city space, within the built environment. Via Savoie, France, Le Corbusier, ground level stilts, functional roof, free floor plan, right? This is okay. Oh, well, Le Corbusier is more new internationalism. Oh, it's about, I argue, it's a rose by another name. Corbusier is very, very Bauhausian in his approach, obviously. In the monochromatic blending interior exterior, the geometrical appropriateness. We're not having a lot of verticality here, but there is the open, free space free floor plan. Farnsworth House, I think, is the best example of this entire paper. Mies van der Rohe, he builds this for this Chicago socialite Edith Farnsworth, white steel glass, floor to ceiling windows, considered one of the most famous pieces of American architecture, has tons of detractors. Wait a second, why would you like this? This looks like just a boxy kind of shed space, storage unit almost. And others are like, it is the Bauhaus principle is taken to their logical conclusion in the most beautiful way. It is so minimalistic, so effortless, so perfectly integrated into the scene. Of course, it's on the National Register of Historic Places and it's priceless and, costs billions of dollars, uh, were it ever up for sale. It's very, very simplistic, right? I love Farnsworth House in its faithfulness to those principles that Gropius first inaugurates. And you see in Glasshouse, Connecticut, Philip Johnson, yes, bullet point number 2, a direct imitation, sincerest form of flattery. It's just Farnsworth House charcoal colored, right? It literally is Farnsworth House with a charcoal exterior, dark charcoal exterior, and no stilts. But basically same dimensions, all that. And once more, in that Bauhaus accentuation of sheer facades allowing interior exterior space to interplay together freely, it's allowing nature to kind of play the starring role. We're not going to do the old architecture, the massive verticality and all that, because then it's all about the built environment and the space. The new architecture is the minimalism, allowing the surrounding ecology and that kind of thing to shine. Into postmodernism, right? Well, so from Gropius, First World War, to these guys, the previous architects we talked about, now it's like, well, Geary and his wife buy this Dutch colonial in Santa Monica. Neighbors dislike it so much they actually call the police. They're like, he's ruining the neighborhood, right? But Geary is basically saying, well, Gropius showed us the way indirectly. I'm not quoting here, right? But he's basically saying, right, we broke from this by the First World War, that great event, that cataclysm, removed all the rules. It's a brave new world, and we're moving forward to something new. And so why can't I build a house that looks like one house is eating another house? This is not a construction site in progress. Have your hard hat, please. This is the completed form, right? Around that Dutch colonialism, we built this corrugated steel and kind of, the overhangs and the chain link fencing. And this is horrifying, right? This is absolutely horrifying and offensive. Or, as many supporters of Geary say, no, this is perfect. This is great. This is the proper bending of the rules that other postmodern architects will take even farther. And we can credit, again, Gropius for being a kind of founding father in the move away from the classical styles. Geary's Experience Music Project in Seattle is a variation on a theme of Santa Monica House, but I would say even more bold. But I think there's some debate there among scholars because maybe Santa Monica House is bolder because it's earlier, so it takes more courage to kind of break that mold so fiercely in the initial phase in the 70s. But this also is more connected to a music festival. It's an homage to Jimi Hendrix. When you look at the right here, the aerial view, it's like smash electric guitar. So is it really that bold, or is it more kind of like a kitschy piece? Nonetheless, very, very postmodern. The New York Times said it looked like hemorrhoids. It looked like something crawled out of the sea and died. That might have been Forbes magazine, one of the ugliest buildings of all time. Welcome to postmodernity, right? And so this is my last slide and leads me to this point here. Is this where we are? Final train, yes, leads to the banana on a wall and imaginary sculptures. I don't know. The banana on the wall artistic exhibition is called The Comedian. And if my facts serve me correctly, my memory serves me correctly, someone bought this for $200,000. It's literally just a banana duct taped to a wall. Because why not? Because postmodernity is whatever rules you want to be. This Italian sculptor sold an imaginary sculpture to a woman for, I believe, 18,000 euro, and then got very angry with her because she did not install it properly. And the woman didn't think to say, "Excuse me, sir, the sculpture is imaginary. I can't install or uninstall it. It doesn't exist." Is this where we are? And again, I will not comment either or. I will not comment in support of Gropius or against him. I will not denounce nor extol the virtues of postmodernity. This is just where we are. And I believe that it all begins with Walter Gropius, who out of the First World War, this cataclysmic event, reimagined what architecture could be. And then people who followed him, like Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, all the way into postmodern architects like Frank Gehry, continued to reimagine livable spaces, the built environment in cities. And now we have an architecture and an art bringing all that full circle. As postmodernity is not just an architectural movement, but also a literary movement, musical movement. a postmodern world where it really is like whatever you want it to be. And so the question scholars, I think, are asking now, and designers, do we return to more classical Vitruvian principles, or do we continue along the path of it can be whatever you want it to be? There are no rules. Thank you very much.